I'll say this: Saquon he's very similar to Chubb when it comes to the off the field work ethic. There's no question about that. He's another one of those guys that is off the field who he is on the field. He is who he is kind of deal. The thing about Saquon that concerns me is this. Anytime you got a guy who has to rely on movements, cutting movements, speed, those kind of things, and you're coming off of an ACL reconstruction and you're around that 10-month mark, I mean, yes, you can play, but are you at the level you were prior to that injury? And that's a lot of questions I have. The other thing I have questions about when we're talking about fantasy and production is the team banking on Saquon for the long term? And if they are, they're going to cut his production early in the season because they're going to want to work him back. If you push him too soon, there's a risk that you do some things to that internal knee that could raise and flare up potential concerns of arthritis down the road. Todd Gurley's a prime example of this. Todd Gurley's a guy who had an ACL tear. There were some concerns about his knee going into the NFL, and you've seen quickly how fast somebody with all the skill and talent in the world has immediately dropped off in the world of the NFL because there's just a huge gap between that elite level of running back and then those who just aren't making the cut. So I personally look at Saquon as a huge risk. He's one of those guys where you could take him, you could roll the dice, and he might end up being a top 5 guy. But he could also end up being a guy that's between 15 and 25. So to me, there's too many other solid backs at the top that if you're put in that spot, you pass on Saquon. I just don't think it's worth the risk this year. Next year, it's a whole different story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I mean, there's 17 guys. I just like 17 guys more than Saquon this year. There is a huge risk with that. But I want you to go ahead with the injury risk first because, I mean, up top, the Giants stink, guys. Their offensive line is trash. Danny Dimes is trash. Jason Garrett, I mean, don't even get me started on Jason Garrett. I know you're a big fan of his, Joey. But, like I said earlier, about Dalvin, about Chubb, you want good players on good teams. And, the Giants, they're just not going to be that good.